Good morning, everybody. I'm Fred Clashman. I'm the editor and publisher of Total Food Service. Once again, we find ourselves in a scenario where there's very little to talk about, but somehow we will find some things to talk about. And of course, I'm just kidding. It's unbelievable between outdoor dining and cocktails to go, et cetera. There's no shortage of topics. So I'd like to go around the room. We're going to do it a little differently. Bob Fiorito, please introduce yourself.
Well, that was a nice introduction, Fred. Bob Fiorito, I'm the VP here at Hub International, mainly with the restaurant division. And I've been writing insurance for restaurants for over 25 years. I've owned and operated restaurants and nightclubs, so I have a good basis to know what you're going through as an operator.
Amanda.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Fagazy. I'm head of the Labor and Employment Group at Ellenoff Grossman Schole, where about 160 attorneys who specialize in all aspects of business law, and my group has a particular concentration in the hospitality industry. Thanks, Fred.
Louis.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Fred, thanks for having me. Guys, good to see you. Lou Fagazy. I'm a producer, new business for hospitality at Hub International. Bob Fiorito as my mentor, and spent 17 years as a bar owner operator in Manhattan. So again, Bob and I are very familiar with what you guys are going through, and we're here to help. Good morning.
Kevin New Pops Dugan.
Thanks, Fred. Hey, everybody. Kevin Dugan, Director of Government Affairs, New York State Restaurant Association. More or less speaks for itself. What we do here at the Restaurant Association. Happy to be here and happy to chat with you all.
Valerie, good morning.
Morning. My name is Valerie Bluth. I'm a partner in the Labor and Employment Group at Ellenoff Grossman Schole, along with Amanda. And as Amanda noted, we have a strong concentration in the hospitality industry. And I personally have spent the last literally almost 2 years focused on all things related to COVID in the hospitality industry. So looking forward to adding to this conversation.
You must have been very busy.
Very, very busy, yeah.
And finally, Mark Lee of Hub.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi. Thanks, Fred. Mark Lee. I've been at Hub for 9 years, Vice President and Risk Services Manager in the Northeast, working primarily in hospitality with risk consulting and risk management advice. So happy to join and look forward to the discussion today.
Terrific. So let's jump right into it. We were just, before we got on, we were talking about where we stand with cocktails to go. Why don't we start with Kevin? Let's talk about what the latest is that's coming down the pike on that.
Yeah, so cocktails to go has been sort of an issue that we at the Restaurant Association have been sort of advocating for since the governor's executive order sort of went away on it, and hoping to see it be made legal here in New York. It was obviously a pretty vital revenue stream for a lot of restaurants during the pandemic, and has continued or would continue to be after the pandemic, with so many folks sort of being reliant on delivery. Delivery has blown up. Even, I remember having these in-person meetings that we used to do, going back to like 2019, and us talking about how big delivery was getting, and it's just dwarfed since then. So because of the pandemic. So obviously during governor's executive order, when it was in place, allowing cocktails to go, alcohol to go, brought in a really needed revenue stream for restaurants, hoping to bring that back this year. The governor is a fan. The governor made mention of it, and it's in her state budget proposal. It's in the budget book. It's in all that good stuff. We at the Restaurant Association have had conversations with the Senate and Assembly. There seems to be some momentum that something will get done on this particular issue this year. And exactly what that will be, it's tough to say at this point. I don't know exactly if there'll be some. I imagine there'll be some sort of guardrails on it, whether it be limiting the number of cocktails you could get, whether requiring you to order it with food, whether allowing full wine bottles or not allowing full wine bottles. All that stuff needs to sort of get figured out as we go along here. But that's sort of the number one issue during this upcoming budget season here in the state of New York. I guess just a bit of context for those who may not know. The New York State budget is due at the end of March. And the governor has already introduced her budget and what she would like to see in this year's addition. The Assembly will come out with their one house, the Senate will come out with their one house budget proposals, and then everything sort of gets negotiated from there between the three branches.
And I
or
asked
three
you earlier,
houses.
it was interesting because I said, why is this a budget figure? Why isn't this just a lid? And that was an interesting answer.
Yeah, so it's a budget issue because of the sales tax. The sales tax is being generated through alcohol to go. Obviously, alcohol sales are taxed at a fairly high rate here in New York, and that brings in significant income to the state of New York. So the governor decided that this was a big enough financial issue to put it in the state budget proposal. Happy to see it in there because again, I think that gives us a better chance of getting something done on it. We were talking a little bit before about what it will look like. I think it's a little early to sort of talk about exactly the parameters surrounding it, but I do feel pretty good at 10:36 on February 10th that something will get done. I wanted to give the date and time because this stuff changes pretty quickly here. So as of this moment right now, I think we'll see something done in alcohol to go this year.
And
So-
Kevin, is it, oh, I'm sorry, Fred, I had
Oh,
a
again, I was gonna
follow-up
ask
question
you.
on that.
I was
Is
going to
it,
ask you.
it's true that on the budget, it's an up or down vote, right? As opposed to legislators tinkering with it. So
Yeah, primarily. I mean, there's always some negotiation sort of after the fact about some of the specifics again. So what the governor's idea is basically setting no parameters surrounding alcohol to go, and the state liquor authority setting all the parameters surrounding it. Like, so it would then turn into, if that version of this were to pass, then all the negotiations or all the discussions would then transfer over to the state liquor authority and talking with them and seeing what they would want to do surrounding it. But I would imagine the Assembly is going to have some idea how to put in place some measures to prevent, people from really taking advantage of it in some way or some form or fashion. Like, I know some of the liquor stores who are vehemently against this proposal, sort of constantly like to say that, well, this would drive them out of business because it would allow restaurants to sell liquor bottles. I don't know of any member of ours that have sold a full liquor bottle. That's not something that restaurants usually do. It's not very affordable, as Bob, as you pointed out earlier.
It'll cost you 3 times the amount to buy a bottle of wine in a restaurant to go than in a liquor store.
Well, what I understand, Fred, was that some of these restaurants and bars were not selling them at bar and restaurant prices. They were dropping the price to liquor store pricing, and they were using it as a vehicle to move product and to make some profit. Now, I mean, one of the things going back to the Stone Ages is that bars and restaurants can sell beer to go. You can sell a beer to go. You don't need this special,
Legislation
from the mayor's office. That being said, from what I gather and what I'm hearing in calls that I've had, that the biggest thing is that the liquor stores are really mobilizing for purposes that, yes, they're going to be put out of business, but they're also using an excuse that it's going to increase drunk driving. It's going to increase drinking in the parks. It's going to increase. Now, the data from the 12 to 14 months that we already had this doesn't show any of that. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're analyzing that data, Kevin, or where they are, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's been no increase in that. They also like to say that, their businesses are going to be irreparably harmed by this. To be honest with you, liquor stores were up 40% when it was legal last year, year over year. So again, I don't think that argument holds a whole lot of water. New York is different in the way we're structured in terms of who can sell what. It's sort of very strict. It's a very strict 3-tiered system here in New York. It's not always that's not the same across the country. So again, I think we're headed in the right direction for restaurants. Again, whether we'll be able to sell full bottles of wine, whether we won't be able to sell full bottles of wine, that stuff's going to be, figured out on the back end. But I'm just hoping that in some form or fashion, restaurants will be able to sell alcohol to go. Lou, I'm glad you brought up beer is already legal. People can do that. A lot of people didn't realize that. A lot of restaurants weren't under that impression before, but you could have always sold beer to go. You could also sell cider and mead to go as well. I don't know how many people are out there selling mead, but if you so choose to, you can.
What is mead? What is it? What is it?
So mead is one of those weird things. It's like a fermented product, it's sort of like wine in that respect, but it's a fermented alcohol product that's very niche places produce. the Belgian monks, I believe, is where it stems from. But you can sell that stuff to go already, cider and mead as well as beer. So if you had any interest in doing that, you can do that right now. You don't need to wait for alcohol to go legislation to pass. You can.
No, I want to, Fred, one second.
I was going to ask you. Go ahead.
Fred, I want to say this, I think, this is all well and good, but I think now I discussed it with one of our attorneys here. I'm concerned about how insurance is going to view this. Right now, it's silent. There's no exclusions. It's just a regular, liquor law situation. But, I talked to Lewis about this and other people. There's going to be some kind of guidelines. You can't go in there and just buy, 20 drinks to go. Because then the insurance companies are going to say, this is a new animal to us. So we're going to investigate it and see if does this apply the way it normally does? You have to go through all the same things, like, observe the person. Is he, intoxicated? Or can I sell it to this person? Can I only sell 2 per person? Or, who knows who he's going to be giving these drinks to? So, I understand it's going to be a nice revenue stream, but I think there's going to be, some scrutiny on exactly how this is going to affect the liquor law liability. And so that's something to consider as well.
No, yeah, Bob, I wanted to, go ahead, Mark. I just wanted to, jump on that and say, we've seen a lot more questions coming up, not only in the Northeast, but across the country with liquor liability specifically. And I think it's important for, restaurants to be doing their due diligence and training their staff, not only having their bartenders tips trained, but also doing regular awareness training and just having refreshers on that type of material, because a lot of times people might do what's required by state, but we've seen over the last couple of years that we need to do above and beyond just what's required in a lot of those instances. And with this law coming, there's going to be more opportunities for some of those liabilities to occur. So it's just becoming ever more, important now to be on top of that.
No, but Mark saying that, it ties into something else we wanted to talk about today, is like how individual individual operators are taking the time to go through exactly what they need during these difficult situations, because insurance companies right now are much more stringent and strict about and Mark is the biggest advocator on the underwriting process, because there have been new kinds of claims. So, it's your broker's responsibility to tailor something individual for their clients, because everybody has a little different needs. And Mark has been a big champion for us. When we have a problem, his team goes out there and identifies the individual issues. And then that's how Hub can really help in identifying and help you get a sort of a manuscript kind of program. So I just wanted to bring that up, because it all kind of ties together with all these new things that are happening and new liabilities that are coming out from all these new laws and the new kinds of operations that are happening.
Right.
So Kevin, if you're an operator, what's the best step? How do you help to get this passed? Do you call your local rep? What do you do?
Yeah, call your local rep. We have a phone to action campaign for the Restaurant Association. It's on our social media channels, and if you guys have any interest, and hope you do, please go share it. It gets you, basically puts you in contact with your local reps. Talk to your customers too. Is one thing we're trying to mobilize too, because this was incredibly popular with the general public. We did a survey last summer on this particular issue, just asking the general public. We had a polling company do a survey of, I think it was 500 people, and it polled that right up near 80% of people were in favor of alcohol to go. For those who don't know, anything polling at 80% is more or less unheard of. So again, the general public likes it. It's something that we hope to see happen this year. So yeah, reach out to your local legislators, let them know you like it, let them know you want it to remain or get reinstated rather. And then, yeah, on the liability issue and stuff like that, I wanted to touch on too. It will require more training as a restaurant owner. You will have to take a more hands-on approach with both your staff, especially if you do your own delivery. They're going to be watching that very closely. So when you're making delivery, if somebody does order alcohol, who comes to the door, checking IDs at the door, making sure the person is who they say they are, that sort of thing that people do at a bar, that a bartender does. And if you do your own delivery, you're going to have to do those steps there. Delivery companies, third-party delivery delivery companies are in favor of this. We've had conversations with them about this particular topic. They're putting in place technology that will allow them to check IDs when they deliver alcohol. They've sort of made the investment in this space as they've seen it being legalized in more and more places. So, but I would imagine that even if you don't want to invest in the technology, you really do have to train up your staff, especially if you're doing your own deliveries. Making sure you're not serving somebody underage, because again, that's where the SLA is going to really crack down on this.
So as we move on, a bunch of other things that are very topical right now. Let's start with the mask issue, which keeps changing every day. Valerie, Amanda, where are we? What's best practices as of this morning?
It's really as of yesterday.
Yeah.
And the governor did away with the quote unquote mask mandate, but it's been, I think it's been reported widely incorrectly, because unvaccinated individuals still need to wear a mask when indoors. And it doesn't change anything for our New York City operators, because it doesn't change anything for key to NYC businesses. So they still need to check vaccination status. And that's how it is. It's because it's fully vaccinated.
We're still in the vax police. We're still in the vax police mode, if you will.
Yeah.
The vax police, but not the mask police.
Okay.
Right.
Well, 1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Who it does change things for are those who are on the call who have an office. That if your office was not a fully vaccinated environment, as of yesterday and prior for several weeks, you were supposed to be requiring everyone to mask, vaccinated, unvaccinated. Now, if you're in an office environment, you can let just your unvaccinated mask.
So then the other thing we have is this morning it changed in schools again, where it's going to still be mandatory to wear a mask in a school. So theoretically, a kid could be wearing a mask in school, leave to come to the local pizza joint, have a slice of pizza, not be required to have a mask on, and then have to go back to school and put the mask on, etc.
Correct.
There's
nothing to say, but you are right, Fred.
Right, I'm just trying to.
It's crazy,
I'm
but
trying
you're
to follow
right.
the bouncing ball. It's not easy. What about other COVID-related legislation that sits right now? So we've dealt with masks, we've dealt with vaccines, et cetera. What else do we need? What else as a restaurant operator do we need to be on top of?
So you're still required to pay people if they're out because they have COVID or are required to quarantine, and those rules have just changed a few times since December 27th. But most recently, the guidance from the state was updated last Friday, the 4th. So it's clear now that if someone is eligible for a booster and didn't get one, they still have to quarantine for at least 5 days after close contact if they don't have symptoms. And you as an employer, unless you have fewer than 10 employees at this point, you have to pay them for all 5 days of work that they missed because they're quarantined. Only work days they were actually scheduled to work. But 5 days for medium-sized employers and up to 14 days for larger employers over 100 employees. Nothing in quarantine leave has changed since April 2020 when it was first passed, except for what you need to provide in order to be entitled to that quarantine leave. So now the state put out these affirmations, one for isolation if you have symptoms or test positive, one for quarantine if you are exposed and have to quarantine, meaning you don't need an order from the health department anymore. If you test positive, a positive test should really be fine. But these affirmations are on the state's website. Person just has to say, yes, I have this qualifying reason.
What about testing? And am I responsible as the restaurateur to pay for that test? How does that work right now?
So if you're requiring an employee to test, then yes, you need to pay for any out-of-pocket costs for the testing or any time spent getting tested if it's outside of regular work hours. There's no requirement that anyone get tested at this point. Either if you have symptoms, you're required to act as if you tested positive from the date your symptoms started. And we actually confirmed that with the state yesterday, that the rule that used to be in place where if you had symptoms and tested negative, you could come out of your quarantine and go back to work. That no longer exists. You still now have to quarantine for 6 days, including the date your symptoms started, before you can even consider coming back to work if you have symptoms that could be consistent with COVID. So I think that's the primary change from before the end of December, is that there's no sort of get out of jail free card if you test negative.
Yeah,
So-
and I think, oh, sorry, Fred,
No, go ahead.
just to put in for a second here. I think that this is a major issue for those on this call, because this has contributed like nothing else, I think, to the labor shortage, right? So the problem is that you're already short, and then you have all of these people that have to be out on quarantine, and you have to pay them, and then you have to pay overtime to your people that are staying.
Covering for the people, right?
And it's I've heard from more operators that this was the #1 reason to close down for a couple of weeks, because they just couldn't afford to operate if they were going to have to pay the quarantine leave plus the overtime. That it really created a financial hardship. So we're hoping, I mean, I don't know, Kevin, have you heard anything about this program, this new type of leave pay coming to an end?
I mean, I think no is the short answer. I think it's going to be here for at least another month, or at the minimum here. I don't think they're going to change that rule until the numbers get to a point where it is extremely low. I just don't foresee that happening. We're in New York State. Generally speaking, we like to make sure the employees are taken care of, and so I don't necessarily foresee that changing in the near term. I think it's going to be a bit. I did want to just add one item or addendum, I should say, to what we were talking about with the mask mandate and how things have changed. Municipalities in counties are still able to do their own mandates. They're still able to put that in place if they so choose. So again, it goes back to New York City, like the mask mandate changing at the state level doesn't change much for New York City. New York City has to actually change their regulations for it to have an impact here. Has to change the key to NYC. I do think, again, this is nothing for sure. I think this gives the mayor a little motivation to take a look at the program and possibly change it now that things have changed at the state level, and especially since it's not his program. It wasn't, he didn't start it. So I think this may move him in that sort of direction. But again, businesses can still do this on their own as well. If you still want to have a mask or vaccine mandate and you exist outside of New York City, you can still have a mask or vaccine mandate. You can still, do that in your business if you so choose. This is no longer the requirement from the state. So I want to just make sure people understood that counties and municipalities can still sort of operate if they so choose on a different.
So do you guys think do you think that customers should drive the culture in that restaurant, or the employees and the ownership and the staff should drive it?
The mayor yesterday, in response to this the state says no more masks, but the cities and the counties can do it, and businesses can do what they want. Mayor Adams issued a statement that he's not putting a mask mandate in place. I mean, the city still has unvaccinated people must wear masks, and fully vaccinated are encouraged to wear masks if they are in crowded indoor places, but it's up to you. I think that he's going to let it be up to the individual to have this, sense of individual responsibility. So it could be the business saying, we want to set a good example, so we're going to still make our employees wear masks because it's going to engender, goodwill from the customers. They feel safer. Or, the opposite end of that is people are going to be as responsible as they want to be. So if they want to wear a mask, they can. Obviously, in restaurants, the customer wearing a mask doesn't do much because no one's wearing a mask once they're seated. So if the employees aren't,
how do you eat when you're wearing a mask?
Yeah.
very well, the whole sip and replace thing or bite and replace thing is not really working. But I think that it's really going to be up to the individual business and the employee sort of sentiment about whether or not wearing masks is still a good idea. I don't think the customers in this industry, at least, are going to drive it. It might be the case in other industries, but I think restaurants, it's not. And sorry, Fred, I don't want to interrupt, but just to clarify something that Kevin was saying about, the city has its own rules. I think there was a question in one of the boxes here about whether this mask mandate being quote unquote lifted affects New York City. It does affect New York City. It's just that it's not in practice really affecting restaurants because you already need fully vaccinated people both working and eating in your restaurant.
So, and somebody just asked along that, could somebody just, it says an employee could put any date they want on the isolation quarantine affirmation. So how valid are they?
I mean, the affirmation, I haven't looked at it closely enough in the last day or so to know whether this is on there, but I'm certain that there is some, like, if you find out the person's lying, you fire them. You know,
Donna, the answer is they're not valid. I mean, you know, some of them are valid because some people are telling the truth, but there's no way to, you know, let's track the validity of this. I think though, Val, do you want to go through, somebody asked prior up, could you repeat the procedure for quarantining?
Sure.
Right,
It's complicated.
Sure, it is complicated. So for someone who has COVID symptoms or tested positive for COVID or has symptoms and is awaiting a COVID test result, you quarantine for 6 days, including the date symptoms started if you are symptomatic, or the date of that the positive test was taken if you are not symptomatic. So the guidance from the state has been confusing because it says 5 days, but that's day one is the day after symptoms started or the day after you test positive or take the positive test. So when you're looking at it in practicality, it's 6 days, including the date that your symptoms started or the date that you took a test if you turn out negative. On the 7th day, you can come back to work if you're symptomatic and your symptoms are improving, like you're not still, hacking up along all the time. People have to be using their own judgment. Neither the CDC nor the state have really given parameters on what, symptoms improving or symptoms resolving really means. But as a general matter for this industry, they can come back on the 7th day after symptoms started, or if asymptomatic, they took a positive test. And they need to keep wearing a mask at all times through day 1. So that day 10 rather. So that has nothing to do with the mask mandate being lifted or not. If you are sick or were sick, you have to wear this mask for a full 10 days. For people that were just in close contact with someone who has COVID, if you are eligible for a booster and boosted, or fully vaccinated but not eligible for a booster, you don't have to quarantine at all after a close contact unless you become symptomatic, or test positive, in which case you go back to the rules for someone who tested positive or had symptoms. If you are eligible for a booster and don't have one, or you are not fully vaccinated, you have to quarantine for 5 days from the date of close contact, much like 5 days after the date of close contact, 6 days, including the date of close contact, much like the 5-day / 6-day quarantine for having tested positive or having symptoms. So it gets very complicated. We can definitely help you work through those things in policy form. It sounds a little easier. It's a little easier when you read it than when you hear it. So feel free to get in touch with us after this.
So the other thing that comes out of this too is, like Amanda said, you guys said, well, you just fire them, et cetera. Well, before we go that route, there's still a tremendous shortage of labor, if I understand correctly. So we need to figure out what this labor force can look for and how do we work.
And no, we never say just fire them.
Okay.
That's like the antithesis of what an appointment lawyer says. No way.
Okay. Well, somebody said, if they lie on the quarantine,
the lawsuits are going to be out of this world when this is over.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm going with the question. So.
Yeah, and how do you lie, to someone's, I think there was a question about how many times do we have to do this? How many times do we have to pay it? Someone could lie on their affirmation once, but after you pay the person for their initial period of quarantine leave, there is a second and third period of leave available, but only if the person tests positive again. So it's not that, oh, well, I was in close contact again, or, oh, I have symptoms again. You need an actual positive test. So someone is going to end up, if they lie about needing to quarantine and they end up testing positive, they're going to be out of luck. But Kevin, actually
on top of it, the problem is the weather gets good, the restaurant gets busy, life needs to go on. Who's going to bust the tables? Who's going to cook?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
in a life that's kind of turned into a $17 an hour dishwasher, where do we go from here?
You know,
in terms
Fred,
of, go ahead.
yeah, let me just add to that. I mean, it's funny you say $17 dishwasher. We're hearing all about $22 an hour salad makers and pizza places. But one thing that has to be borne in mind that I think comes out of your question is we are seeing sort of rampant disregard for this new 80-20-30 federal rule on the tip credit and taking of the tip credit. And I just put it out there that, look, it's been in place now over a month, and you need to be paying it maybe over 2 months. I can't remember, but restaurateurs need to be paying attention to it, because this is another area where the lawsuits are going to be rampant and liability is going to be huge. And we're seeing a lot of violations in that there's not enough staff. So managers are doing work of non-exempt people. So they're polluting tip holes. And particularly on the 80-20-30, we're seeing it that the people who show up, they have to do everything because you don't have enough people. So it's getting violated like left and right. And restaurateurs, I think, really need to buckle down and figure out a system for complying with this.
Sort of goes into my next question for the panel, which is there going to be another honeymoon? Omicron is gone. The weather's going to get good. We're going to be out again. We're going to talk about dining in a minute as well. Is there going to be a honeymoon period in which so-so food is acceptable, in which it's a nice day, I'm happy to be out, etc.? What about the operational efficiency of the industry? What do you guys see? What has to happen? Well,
I'm seeing that there's certainly a honeymoon period now. I monitor the Yelp pages, I monitor the Facebook groups, and the second somebody puts up a bad post, 10 people come back at them. Give these people a break, look what they're going through. So I certainly think that there's a grace period, a honeymoon period, as you put it. When will that end? I don't know. At some point with this inflation going up, you're paying a fortune to eat out. So at some point, do I think that, customers are going to sit back and say, you know what? I just paid a lot of money. My meal wasn't that good. They're short staffed. I didn't get a drink. I didn't get silverware. Yes. When? I don't know. I think certainly you have time, but.
Yeah, let me go a little further with that. I think you're right, Louis. And there is a honeymoon period, and people are just happy to be in some kind of normality. But, good operators are very, their product is their product. They're not going to put, just a substandard product on a table. And that's why you're seeing limited menus at big time restaurants, because they say, I can't do my whole menu, but I can do partial of my menu, and I can do it well. And, they have much more, they're not going to put a bad product in. The average kind of, restaurant, I guess, will do, but not the people who really have the notoriety and the love. I think the best thing they're doing is limiting their menu, and that menu is going to be good until they have the staff to do everything at perfection. That's
I think part of that has come too from you have operators that have for many years worked with a single broadline distributor or a specialty distributor, whether it's Cisco, US Foods, or whatever. And now I think you see a lot of you see multiple distributors going into places they never had access before, because the distributor can't get their hands on product either. And that's where the menu cut has come from as well.
Right, and that's why it changes, and it's limited, because they know what they can get, and it changes. Some months you can't get everything, but you're going to hone it down because you're the kind of operator who understands how to budget all this stuff. And then so maybe you don't have 10 entrees, you have 7, but they're all done at a high level, because they're not going to charge you. People will be irate at upscale restaurants to that. So. Yes, I think it's just a matter of everybody just getting very closer to the everyday operation, and I think it'll work out fine in the long run.
Next big question that's on everybody's mind is this outdoor dining that we've all been hearing about in the city over the last week. Can somebody sort of take us through where we are with this discussion from a legal standpoint, and then where we are with it from an execution standpoint? Kevin?
Yeah, I could jump in. There was a hearing earlier this week at the city council. I think over 250 people testified. The hearing, I think, started at 10 in the morning. I think went on past 7:30 at night. Vehement points of view on both sides. The city, from what I understand, wants to put in place sort of a permanent program for outdoor dining. Obviously, there's some areas in the city where folks had mobilized and sort of push back hard on that because if they claim it creates quality of life issues. I think some of them referred to outdoor dining structures as shanty towns, which I thought was a little harsh. But yeah, so it's still going to be up for debate exactly what it's going to look like. I do sort of anticipate the city moving in a direction where they're going to make some program permanent. They're going to do something here with outdoor dining. It was such a success. I do sort of think there'll be more rules in place surrounding what those are going to look like, which will have a big impact on the insurance. I would imagine, Lou, Bob, and Mark, they're going to have, I think we're going to see more on that front in terms of more rules in place, being able to be more transportable, getting them in and out of places. I wouldn't be shocked that if community boards have a little bit more say in this stuff, that you'll see some, curfews, some more strict curfews being put in place exactly when folks can operate with their outdoor dining structures and things like that. But this is, the state legislature has basically given the authority to municipalities to sort of dictate their own rules on this sort of stuff. It's legalized for the rest of 2022. There's legislation that would again legalize it across the state up to municipalities discretion, I should say, for 2023. I do sort of think we're going to, have this going forward. But again, it's going to be interesting to see. I hate to use the word guardrails again because he's so much talking about alcohol to go, but it's going to be a similar thing here. What guardrails are going to be in place to try to find that balance between, restaurants being able to have a nice outdoor area, but also not interfering with the quality of life issues some folks brought up at the hearing.
I want to say one thing. I've been it's been fortunate that we haven't had any catastrophes with some of these things. I mean, I've been so lucky. Only one of my operators had an incident where a sanitation truck backed into one of their facilities and no one was injured. But they're situated so difficultly on the streets. But then we're talking about some of my clients have really made beautiful. I mean, spending $50,000-$60,000 on these things. And they're beautiful. You almost go into and you feel like you're in a private dining room. And then you see other things that look like they're just anything they could put up fast. So it's such a dichotomy that I'm sort of really confused about how it should go forward. We have some beautiful structures and we have other ones that, are not so nice and really are maybe a hazard on the street. So it's going to be a difficult situation.
To further that discussion, Bobby, I haven't heard of many, and maybe you have, but many lawsuits stemming from on our end. And I mean, I guess this is also for Amanda and Valerie on ADA stuff with these outdoor structures.
We have not. We have not seen. We anticipated it, but we haven't seen them yet.
It's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I have.
Yeah, and the other issue is the seasonality of this. I mean, it's really two different businesses. It's what happens in the summer and the spring when people are outside and there isn't snow removal going on, et cetera, and I don't need propane. And then what happens in the winter and fall when I needed the seating, et cetera. In other words, to me, it's two very different businesses.
Kevin, I'm curious. I always thought that a big problem with this, and I think it remains in the regulations, is that you're supposed to be able to move these things if there's a big snowstorm, right?
Yep.
And I'm with Bob that, we've seen beautiful ones that there's no way you could just move it. It's like a whole restaurant's been built outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be transportable in case of what's the term they use, like public service emergencies, something like that, which includes snow removal, includes if there's a fire, some medical emergency, you need to have like ambulances and things like that. People need to be able to get through. That's always been the case. I don't know why they're there or why they're not there. Maybe they're not on a particular route. Maybe they're enough off the main roads that it's viable. But you are supposed to make it transportable in case, you know, folks need to get by. They need to be able to be broken down fairly quickly if something were to happen. So again, that is a requirement of the outdoor dining law, both at the state and municipal level.
Well, maybe the government's giving the industry a much needed break.
Yeah, I got a hunch.
So I always
probably
feel
what it is.
doubtful about that, but maybe in this one instance.
Yeah.
And also, if it becomes,
I mean,
if it becomes permanent, then you'll have a whole world of people building these things properly, et cetera, and creating transport. I think it'll change the type of structure that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right, Fred. I think if it becomes something permanent, they're going to make nice facilities because, and you know, it's going to be it's going to be the calling card to their dining indoors. I mean, they want to, you know, make it in the same kind of vein, not just something to, you know, makeshift just for the time being.
Yeah, that goes to a thing like, oh, go ahead, Lou.
Sorry, Kevin. But on that note, Bobby, and I know you're very familiar with this, how has the insurance changed for these outdoor structures? I know that you've been working on this like crazy.
Well, they're underwriting, you know, in general with insurance, underwriting is much, much more strict. I mean, they're looking at every little thing. I mean, people who have had the same carrier now have other supplemental applications. I mean, you know, they've had losses. And so now things are being done, you know, strictly by the book. And, you know, if losses are driving that particular account, they're going to have increases. They're going to have rate increases. So that's when Mark's team, you know, goes out to these different situations and really evaluates, is this done correctly? Is this going to go through the right process of the analysis with the underwriters? So that's really what, you know, our job is. I mean, your broker needs to find out what your particular needs are. Do you have a beautiful outside structure? Do you have other things that need to be attended to so that when you do go to market, you're going to get the most comprehensive coverages at the most competitive pricing, not just renew your policy.
Mark, walk us through the aesthetics of the structural issues. Walk us through what people you're looking for.
What I was first going to say is, to Bob's point, obviously with carriers, they're not just going to take your application or what you say you have in place. They're not going to take you at your word. They're going to start doing, you know, as they've already begun doing more inspections and trying to see these in person. And especially when the new regulations come out, they're going to be on top of that and trying to make sure that you guys have everything per the guidelines. And Fred, sorry, what was your second question about?
Well, in other words, Bob said, when your group goes out to look at a structure, you know, besides the aesthetics of saying, gee, this is really nice looking, it's, you know, what's the insurance view of what this thing needs to look like?
The primary thing that we're looking at, obviously in the winter, we're looking at fuel and how things are heated and basically how things are situated in terms of general liability. If there are things in the walking path, on the sidewalk, if you're having electric going to the outdoor structure, how is that fed? And things of that nature. And obviously it gets into the portability and how far you're getting into the road and kind of basically just going by the guidelines that Kevin's talked to and making sure that they follow that. And we try to work with people on setting up their facility and setting up the area and try to be creative. But like Bob said, they want to make that kind of inviting and have the same appeal that the indoor dining has. So it needs to still obviously be aesthetically.
I'm curious, are you anti-propane, for propane? What are your thoughts on that going forward?
I mean, I'm for it. I think it's you know, easier for the restaurateurs in order to heat their areas. And I think that it can be managed effectively with certain risk management, you know, procedures. I think it's just a good way for them to do it. I know, but obviously there are some negatives. So you have to do, you know, a risk assessment prior to that and make sure that it is effective. And if not, then obviously go with the electric.
Got it. So along these lines with outdoor dining and things like that, we're obviously have a new mayor. Is there any sense of yet whether it's become easier to cut through red tape and do the things one needs to do in order to open up a restaurant? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's
Kevin,
too soon. Yeah, it's still too soon to tell.
Okay.
You know, I think he hasn't been in office too terribly long here. He's you know, he's clearly prioritizing sort of you know, crime and safety as sort of which the industry writ large is happy to see.
I can argue with.
Yeah. And sort of prioritizing those in his first few months here in office. So I think, like, you know, I think it's too soon to say. I mean, we've had productive conversations, introductory conversations as an association to his office and things like that. So we're hopeful about that. Not quite sure why he did what he did and why he's saying he's a vegan and then he's not a vegan. That whole thing was weird. But he's sort of a strange guy, to say the least. But yeah, you know, I think it's too soon to tell exactly what the Adams administration is going to look like from the restaurant point of view. I do think there's going to be, he's mentioned it before, in terms of climate action. I think there is going to be some aggressive proposals from his administration about you know, food and food production and things like that could have an impact on the restaurant industry. And I think he does have very strong beliefs when it comes to, you know, diet and things like that. And I think we're going to see, you know, exactly what shape that looks like and how that affects policy. But, you know, wouldn't be shocked.
English Friday in schools was the first piece last week.
Yeah, agreed. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see, you know, the Bloomberg soda ban circle back around. That you know, that wouldn't surprise me. And things sort of along those lines, where, you know, he does try to demonstrably change some of the things that are going on with you know, I guess eating habits in the city. I don't know how much he's going to be able to change it, but we'll see. I think we may see some of that stuff at least start to percolate from the administration.
So you could buy a 46-ounce cocktail, but not a 46-ounce soda.
Yeah, exactly. Theoretically, yeah. So.
Got it. What about, and speaking of, you just talked about, we touched on it, one of our favorite subjects is always delivery. There were some big changes in the last couple of weeks in terms of delivery rights of drivers and delivery people. Can we talk a little bit about that and what we see happening with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think delivery. I can't remember if it's since the last time we spoke together, but there's now a permanent fee cap for delivery fees here in New York. 15% for delivery. They can charge another up to 5% for marketing, and then, you know, something that was added in there was 3% for credit card fees. They could pass those along. There is litigation challenging this. Valerie and Amanda may be able to speak a little bit to where that stands. I am not a lawyer. I haven't said that yet today, but I say that at least multiple times a day. I am not a lawyer, so I don't want to comment on that too much. But we'll see what happens there. And then with delivery drivers and stuff like that, there's if folks if a delivery driver needs to use the restroom, restaurants are sort of mandated to allow them to use your facility, as long as they don't have to go through the kitchen. I think it's like cause like an interruption to that service. I think again, as restaurants go, pretty low lift. I think, you know, letting somebody use the bathroom if they need to when they're delivering your food, I think is sort of not beyond the pale, so to speak. But yeah, just making sure that you allow that to happen if folks coming in. So something to keep in mind going forward for sure.
Amanda, Valerie, what do you guys see with that?
I mean, there was this whole sort of delivery person's Bill of Rights that came out, but the only real effect it has on restaurateurs is allowing them to use the bathroom. The rest of it has to do with, you know, their pay vis-a-vis the
Right.
owner of the delivery service. So I think for the purposes of our audience, Kevin's 100% right. It's a pretty low lift. In terms of the litigation that's pending on these limitations for the delivery companies, I think it's pending. I mean, I don't think that there's been answers on it. So we don't have any news.
Yeah, I believe they've tried this in other locations where these caps have been put in place to not much effect. San Francisco, I think they tried to overturn it and they didn't get it overturned there. So again, I don't necessarily anticipate them having success, but again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get too far down that path.
Well, one of the things that always interested me is we've talked about this subject now for 2 or 3 years, is are you better off with your own delivery people, or are you better off with using third-party platforms? What are the pros and cons from an operational and a legal standpoint?
You know, what I've been hearing lately, which is interesting, is that I think since these caps have been put in, that it's tilted that restaurateurs for the most part think it's much better to have a service. But it used to be, you know, the fees and all these other problems were really prohibitive, so I think that the balance has largely been tipped. But, you know, you still have to be careful. And I know, Fred, you love this topic. It comes up all the time on every call we're ever on together. It's but you got to be super careful about issues of joint liability and whose employees these are, you know, the delivery people, because so many restaurateurs take it for granted. Oh, this is so-and-so's employee. I don't have to worry about them. But you know what? If you're their main gig and they're showing up specific hours at your diner all the time to run your deliveries, and you're letting them go behind the counter and do this and that, you can wind up with some real issues. So you got to make sure you're protected in your contract.
And now on top of it, the city says they have to be able to use your bathroom too.
And they have to be able to use your bathroom.
Right. So I mean, it becomes really interesting.
I mean, at the end of the day, everybody gets brought into a lawsuit, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So, you know, just make sure you're protected.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you go through your contracts with your broker.
Yeah, but it's sort of like this, right? So we represent some large catering halls who don't, and that's not even the right way to say it. Sorry, let me back up. We represent some large event venues who don't do their own catering. And they're being sued, right? This is an analogous sort of situation for the caterers who come in and bring the food and serve the food. And the event venues are saying, like, we're not responsible. They're not our employees. All we do is call the boss of the company. And, you know, the boss of the company sends the food, sends the people. Like, why are we responsible? And it's you know, we'll tell you, I could swear all day up and down that they're not responsible, but the plaintiff's lawyers seem to have a theory that they may be.
Interesting. What about in terms of, as we see, one of the issues is, what do you think in terms of the financing of restaurants going forward? I know it's not something that we deal in, but I'd like to get everybody's thoughts as we look at the repackaging and the restaurant revitalization fund, et cetera. Kevin, what do you see from a financing of restaurant standpoint?
Well, I think the industry is in such flux right now, and we've touched on a lot of it sort of already, and taking like a sort of a holistic picture of the industry. It's tough, but I think it's a very difficult situation restaurants find themselves in. But again, and I've said this now going on almost 2 years, but there is a light, I think, now finally at the end of the tunnel. Whereas, you know, this summer is sort of, you know, look, if Omicron goes by and we can finally get back to some sort of normality here, I think you are going to see sort of a boon to the business, much like we saw last summer, you know, when folks were able to get out and about, and the restaurant industry really thrive before the second variant kind of got here. Third variant, I should say, before that, you know, sort of took hold. So I do think we're on the precipice of sort of a good time for the industry. But you know, we mentioned it a little bit before, in the sense that, you know, inflation's not going away. That's going to be a lagging problem here, and that's going to be here for a bit. And so we are going to have trouble with supply chains. That's not going to change, you know, for at least the next 6 months, from what I understand, on just about, you know, and it's the really difficult part. I think Bob mentioned it before. Some weeks you're going to be able to get something. The next week you're going to be able to get something else. But you're not going to know. You know, it's going to be one of those things where you're really going to have to do your due diligence on your suppliers.
Lots of specials on the menu.
Lots of specials on the menu, lots of changing of the menu, lots of just a really deep dive into making sure you're using all the ingredients that you are able to get to sort of construct these things, using every part of whatever vegetable you can to stretch it as much as you can, because these things are unprecedentedly expensive right now. And it's just like combine that. And again, as we mentioned before, like this labor shortage thing isn't also just going to go away overnight. We're still going to have to deal with that. So the restaurants are tough finance right now, frankly. I mean, it's a tough business to sort of get into because of the upheaval and in the the problems that a lot of the folks are still facing, and coming from a federal standpoint in terms of money. Our partners at federal partners are looking at hopefully getting another round of the RRF in. I don't know if that's particularly likely, but they're sort of saying like it might be in the federal budget bill. Hopefully it is. Hopefully there's another round of funding for restaurants who were unable to get that valuable income last time around. That would certainly go a long way in helping to stabilize the industry. But we're anything but stable right now. The industry is sort of not the most stable industry in the best of times, and so we're now at a time when everything's changing. That both some good, some bad. So it's sort of like it's tough to tell exactly where we're going to be in 6 months. But God willing, we're in a better place, at least with the buyers.
Kev, I'm the eternal optimist, obviously. I mean, it's just, but I've been seeing, doing some of my clients who I've had for a long time with multiple locations, they're up dramatically. I mean, dramatically. I don't even want to go in percent. I mean, dramatically from what they were reporting last year on revenue and now getting closer and closer to, where they were. I mean, people 60, 70% where they were in 2000.
Why? What are the reasons?
I think people are out. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know where all this is coming from. I'm out all the time. I mean, why? Where's the fear? You have a vaccination now, so you'll get a cold. Okay. I mean, stop already. Enough is enough. I mean, you only can be so careful. I mean, now you got to get these N95 masks, okay, because they're better than this one and that one. I mean, just do the simple, safe things. And operators are aware of it. They're checking every. I go to places 3 and 4 times. They still ask me for my vaccination card. They still ask me for my ID. I'm fine with all that. I mean, like if you want me to, I want to be in the place. I want to be out. I don't want to stay home. Being home is like confinement.
Right.
And I don't understand why people want to work at home either. It's not more productive. They're getting just too complacent with that. Go out. That's what New York City is all about. That's why you're here. And otherwise, you should go to the suburbs.
Right. So one of the things that's interesting with this too is, will we see a boom of new restaurants opening? And with that, will we see a different type of lease from landlords?
Well, I'm finding I'm getting a lot. Louis and I get them in here and they ask us to review them. I just had one yesterday. And I think landlords are ready to negotiate with good operators that they know they've been in the industry for a long time. They know they have longevity, people like that. I think you could make really good deals. But, and the insurance requirements haven't changed dramatically. I mean, they may be like worrying about if you're doing a build out, your contractor has the third party overlaw, things like that, but they should be doing that anyhow. I think it's much more stringent now. But I think growth is going to be incredible. An investment group just came. They're going to open 3 new restaurants in New York. Now who's doing this? Other operators are finding nice spaces that people went out on. Listen, New York is ready to bust wide open. Enjoy your life. Forget about the difficulties. We've had enough of it. I'm sorry. That's just the way I live my life.
All right. So who wants to hang out with Bobby?
But we're seeing I think we're seeing a lot of percentage rents where it used to be like totally taboo. We never now I'm seeing a lot of offer deals where there's some base rent, but then it's a percent over. And one of my clients who had sworn off ever opening another restaurant in New York is kind of interested now again.
Yeah.
So I think, he was adamant. He would never open another one in New York. Now all of a sudden he's not so adamant.
There's many more players that never were in the restaurant industry that want to get into the restaurant industry. I'm finding out, and many more groups, are diversifying their portfolio. They own real estate, but not, maybe we want a few restaurants, in these buildings that we own or lease or whatever.
Well,
So,
for instance, we just did this story on this. You guys know this Gary Vaynerchuk guy who's been well known in the wine business and well known.
yes.
So they just did they did a finance on an NFT play. They raised $13 million in 5 minutes with crypto. I wonder if we're going to see a world of crypto restaurants that are going to open.
There
Mayor's
is some new one that I
Yeah.
was reading, I think the same thing, Fred, where it's like a sort of membership club
Correct.
to eat at the restaurant
Mayor's
for a lot of
certainly
money.
a big fan.
Yeah.
Mayor's certainly
Yeah.
a big fan of crypto. But I think, look, I think if I could sort of like tell restaurants one thing, at this point is, as we get ready to sort of, in Bob's word, hopefully bust wide open here, is also to, take the lessons that you've learned, from this and really use them to your advantage. Like go, like, some of it's alcohol to go is outdoor dining and things like that. But really, like, I think we've learned some valuable lessons as an industry that, where for a long time, the restaurant industry, has been pretty slow to evolve. Things have always sort of been done one way, and that's the way we do it. But incorporating more technology, especially when it comes to your labor force, right? Streamlining things and to make it so maybe you don't need those couple extra runners. Maybe you can figure out a way to do things a little bit differently. Maybe you never thought about utilizing outdoor space before, but now all of a sudden, because I do think we have a breed of customer in New York City that has fallen in love with outdoor dining and has sort of now that's the way they prefer to dine if they can. And I think using those, lessons, maybe taking a long look at your menu, maybe making your menu a little bit more delivery friendly, things that travel a little bit easier, especially if you're a restaurant that really never talked about doing delivery before, thinking about different dining experiences you can offer your customers at home. These meal delivery kits that are such the rage, restaurants can do that too, offering some sort of, at-home meal delivery kit. God willing, you'd be able to offer a bottle of wine that pairs well with it, with alcohol to go. And, having that sort of in dining room experience, but having somebody to have that at home, which is more accessible to some folks, depending on their work schedule and the like. Utilizing these lessons and not forgetting that, just because we're out of the pandemic and life has returned to some sort of normalcy, not forgetting some things that worked during the pandemic, because I think those are still going to work going forward. And that would be like,
Kevin, you're exactly right. I mean, now restaurateurs, before restaurants were full, there was always cash flow. Now they're not so full. So what do you have to do? You have to be much more budget conscious. You have to do like, what's your break even every day?
Yep.
So you know what you can spend and what you can spend. That's going to generate what you're going to buy. That's how you become profitable. Unfortunately, when you're just busy, you just keep moving money.
Doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but now, Fred, that's what a good operator is all about, because then that's where the percentage comes in. It's not just, oh, my restaurant's full, I'm making my payroll, but what really is my bottom line? What's my break even? Because, in the industry, after break even, every dollar is 50% profit, but you got to get to break even every day. That's the problem.
I like what Kevin said. I like what Kevin said about tech. Maybe you go start in your kitchen and maybe you look at 500 square feet that you just dedicate to a redo to create something that can handle takeout and delivery, etc. Maybe it's time to do that, and the type of packaging that you're using, etc.
The one lesson I hope I've seen, and I hope carries through, when Kevin says that this has been an industry that's been slow to evolve, it's been an industry that's been left behind in terms of lobbying and politicians, right? So the hotel industry is miles ahead of the restaurant industry in terms of having their say in government. You see the landlords, forget it, nobody's got it better than the landlords. You see the liquor stores, right? They're beating the crap out of the restaurants all the time. At the end of the day, this is a giant industry. It's time to be organized as owners, as operators, and get your say. Who gets elected matters. right? It matters, and it matters in terms of your business, and it matters in how you get the government's foot off your neck.
And I just wanted to add another point to what Kevin was saying about staff shortages and technology. And I know we've mentioned it on some past webinars, but there's a lot more HR consulting firms using technology and analytics, and Hub partners with one HR consulting technology company. And basically they're using that analytics to, put together employee value propositions, help companies with their messaging and branding and their rewards and benefits for clients, and helping with, targeted talent acquisition. So those types of things can be used in this industry and help with that.
What's
And I
the
thought it
name
kind
of
of,
the company, Mark? Share the name of the company with us.
I believe it's just HR consulting. So I
Okay,
can send out the group. We have a sheet on it. But it's through Hub, and it's, a vendor partner that we have. So that can definitely be utilized, and it's another, unique technology thing that, we're seeing all these different options pop up. So I think that's something that is going to be used in the industry, and already seeing some success with it.
Automate, automate, automate. Especially if especially if it's affordable technology.
Well, that's the thing, it's, human labor is getting more and more expensive, and technology keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. So, it's definitely something to look at.
Yep. Interesting. Any final points, guys? Any final takeaways? Thank you so much, everybody. Great session. Good days ahead.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
Great days ahead.
Thank you.
Happy
Good to
everybody.
see everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.